Hello and welcome back to Local Predictions. As you can tell by the title, this video is going to be about my senatorial election prediction for 2024. And yeah, this is going to be my final prediction. We are just 3 days away from the election. Today is November 2nd. At least when I'm filming this, it's November 2nd. We are 3 days from the election, 72 hours. It is unbelievable. When you guys are seeing this, we are just 2 days away. I can't believe we're this close. Before we jump into it, I'm going to ask you all to please like and subscribe the video. We are about 330 subscribers right now. We're trying to get to as much as we can before Election Day, when inevitably my views start to go down a little bit. But yeah, let's just jump right into the election prediction for the Senate. So we'll start off with the safe Democratic states. These states, I believe, will go to the Democrats by more than 15%. We have California, my home state, where Adam Schiff is going to win here by a pretty solid margin. We also have Washington, Hawaii, Maine, and also Maine and Vermont. There are two independent senators here. In Maine, it's Angus King, and in Vermont is Bernie Sanders. Both of these two affiliate with the Democratic Party. They caucus with the Democratic Party, so I'm just going to have them as Democrats. We have Massachusetts, where Elizabeth Warren is up for re-election, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, and then New Jersey is going to be a little bit closer. And then we have Delaware. So yeah, we have 38 seats for the safe Democratic ones. And the reason that there are, if we remove all these, we can see that Republicans already have a huge advantage starting out. It's 38 to 29. 38 to 28. There's a 10-seat advantage. Democrats just have more seats up for re-election, which is why it is very likely that Republicans do wind up winning this Senate election. So yeah, 38 to 28, and that will do the safe Republican states. We have Wyoming, North Dakota, Nebraska's special election, West Virginia. We have Joe Manchin, who is an independent, however, was caucusing with the Democrats. He is now retiring. He is stepping down, and it'll be Jim Justice, who's the current governor of West Virginia, who will be running here. He's probably going to win by some 50%. He's extremely popular, and he's a Republican in West Virginia. So then we have Tennessee, where Marsha Blackburn's up for re-election, Mississippi, and then we have Utah, and that is all of the safe Republican seats. That brings them up to 45 to the Democrats 38. Keep in mind, you need 50. There are 100 senators in the Senate right now, and you need 51 to have a majority. However, 50, you can break it with a tie with the vice president. So let's say the Republicans get 50, and then Donald Trump wins the presidency. Then J.D. Vance would be able to break the tie in favor of Republicans, and it's the same thing for Democrats. So yeah, 45 Republicans, 38 for Democrats. These are the safe seats. These seats are not going to switch in any scenario whatsoever. These ones, the next ones could theoretically switch, but they're going to be very difficult too. So these are the likely states. We'll do the likely Democratic ones. We have Minnesota, where Amy Klobuchar is up for re-election. She won here by like a wide margin last time. Actually, let me pull up the results real quick. I'll be right back. Here we are. These are the results. That's Polymark. If we look at past elections, we can see that the last time Amy Klobuchar was up for re-election, she won here by 24.1%. A safe margin. It's not going to be that wide of a margin this time. It is a presidential election year. So I think Amy Klobuchar will probably win here by 13, 14%. Still going to be pretty solid state for her. Then we have New Jersey, where there was a big scandal with the incumbent Democratic senator, which wound up leading him to resign his post from the Senate. And yeah, it'll be Andy Kim replacing him. He's probably going to win here. And then in Maryland, it's Angela Alsobrooks who will probably win here over. She's going up against Larry Hogan, who was the governor of Maryland a decade ago or something. And he was very popular. However, he is a Republican. So I do think Angela Alsobrooks is probably going to win here because it is Maryland. But yeah, it'll probably be a little bit close because of how popular Larry Hogan is. We then have New Mexico, where Martin Heinrich is up for re-election. Virginia, where Tim Kaine is up for re-election. Tim Kaine was the vice presidential nominee for Hillary Clinton in 2016, and he'll probably win here by a pretty solid margin. And then we have these three states. I have Pennsylvania on here, and I know everyone likes to say Pennsylvania is going to be really close, but I have said time and time again, over and over, that this race is not going to be close, and I'm standing by that. I think Pennsylvania will not be a close race. If you look at the Senate election here, the polls in the general election have Bob Casey up by 2.9 against David McCormick. It's not going to be this close. I am telling you, it's not going to be this close. If we look at 2018, Casey won here by 13%. He won here by 13. He is a very popular senator. I don't know if he ran in 2000. Yeah, 2012. He won by 9%. when was he first elected? Was he 2006? He won by 17. I mean, this guy is an extremely popular senator. I really don't see a way for him to lose here. I think he's going to win here by 6-7%. It will be a bit closer, especially because it is a general election year. However, it's not going to be as close as a lot of people are thinking. Bob Casey is probably going to win here by, if I had to guess, 6-7%. I really don't think Bob Casey can lose here. I think that he has too much going for him, and I think that he is going to win in Pennsylvania. And that is, I mean, that's not all. Then we also have Nevada and Arizona. These two are kind of in the same boat. We have Jackie Rosen, a popular incumbent from Nevada, who is probably going to win here. If we look at the polls, we can see it's a little bit closer. Oh, no, actually, yeah, Jackie Rosen's up by 5.6. It has gotten a little bit closer recently. It was Jackie Rosen up by 9. Now it's plus 5.6. I still think Rosen's probably going to win here by a pretty solid amount, probably about 6-7%. As most of the polls are showing. In Arizona, it is Ruben Gallego versus Kari Lake. Kyrsten Sinema, who was a Democrat but then switched to be a Republican, or not a Republican, independent, stepped down. This has also gotten a little bit closer, but Kari Lake, I think, is just a really weak candidate for the Republican Party. We can see that if we go back to the governor's race, was it 2022? Yeah, we had Katie Hobbs against Kari Lake, and Hobbs is just, she was not a good candidate for the Democratic Party. She was a very, very weak candidate. And Kari Lake still managed to lose to Hobbs in Arizona, which was just a pretty big upset. I think most people thought that Lake was going to win, or at least it was supposed to be pretty close. But I mean, Hobbs is a horrible candidate. She was a horrible candidate, and Kari Lake still managed to lose here. So that proves that Kari Lake is not a good candidate. She's not a good. She is not a strong candidate for the Republican Party. So I really don't think that Ruben Gallego is going to win here. Why does it do this? It always does this. It turns into like vote numbers, and I don't know how that happens, but whatever. So yeah, Arizona I think is going to probably be Ruben Gallego plus 6-7%, a pretty solid margin. And that is it for the likely Democratic states. That brings them up to 46, and then the Republicans have 45. We'll start off for the Republicans, Indiana and Missouri. In Missouri, we have Josh Hawley running for re-election, and actually he has not been too popular recently. If we go back to 2018, we can see that Hawley only won here by 6%. This is Missouri, and it's a Republican. So he should be winning here by a lot more. I don't think he's going to be able to gain 10%. I think because it is an election year, he's probably going to be able to win by a wider margin than 5.8%, obviously, probably about 10 to 11, 12%. Although it's not going to be a safe margin in Missouri. And in Indiana, it's a similar issue. I think in Indiana, it'll probably be, it's Jim Banks running against Valerie McRae. And Jim Banks is probably going to win here by another 13, 14%. We have Mike Braun, who was the senator here, is now running for governor in Indiana. So yeah, Jim Banks is going to be replacing him, and he's probably going to win here by a likely margin as well. And that brings us to these states, which are going to be a bit more competitive. For one, we have Florida. In Florida, it is Rick Scott against Debbie McCarcel Powell. Try saying that 5 times fast. Debbie McCarcel Powell. So yeah, it'll be Rick Scott running as the Republican. If we go back to 2018 here, we can see that it was against Rick Scott narrowly won here against, I'm blanking on his first name, but Nelson, who's a longtime senator. He first became a senator in 2006, and he won here by a very wide margin. Rick Scott it was a big upset. Rick Scott was not supposed to win here. Nelson was supposed to win here by a very wide margin. Rick Scott wound up winning by 0.1. It was very, very competitive. And now with Florida's huge turn to the right, I do think that Florida will probably be Rick Scott plus 6 or 7%. In Texas, actually Texas is going to leave for a little bit. In Montana, I also believe that will be likely. Montana, we have Jon Tester against Tim Sheehy. If we look at the polls, we can see that things aren't looking too good for Jon Tester. Jon Tester, he's running for his 3rd or 4th term. He was first elected in 2006, I think. So yeah, each time he was elected, it has been very, very narrow. However, as we've gotten more and more polarized, and now this is an election year, the odds of him winning are extremely unlikely. I really don't think Jon Tester is going to win here. And as you can see, as Tim Sheehy became more well-known in Montana, he started to take a bigger and bigger lead. He's now up by about 5%. If we look at the most recent polls, I mean, so Sheehy up by 8, 7, 6, 8, 7, 6, 8, 7. This one poll had Tester up by 5. But most polls show Tim Sheehy up by a pretty solid margin, and I do agree with this. I think we're too polarized right now for a Democrat to be able to do extremely well in Montana. I do think it'll be close, but I still think Tim Sheehy's probably going to win here by a pretty solid margin. Next up in Nebraska, I'm thinking about making Nebraska lean. However, I am going to have it as likely because the polls here have been very interesting. We can see it is Deb Fischer versus Dan Osborne. Deb Fischer has ran an absolutely abysmal campaign. She's a Republican. She should have won this state easily. She should have won this race extremely easily. I mean, if we go back to 2018, we can see, I mean, she won it by 19%. She should have won this race extremely easily. It wasn't supposed to be close at all. However, recently it has gotten much closer. In fact, at one point she only led by 0.6. That's because she is running against Dan Osborne, who is an independent, not a Democrat, which does make him more appealing to these Nebraska voters. And we can see there's this one poll way back in November. This was a huge shocking poll that showed Dan Osborne up by 2. I mean, Deb Fischer, she's like, it really hasn't been her whole Senate career. It's mainly been how horrible her campaign is. I mean, everything she's done, it's been a horrible campaign. She's refused to debate Dan Osborne as well. That was another bad look for Deb Fischer, and everything seems to be going wrong that can go wrong for Deb Fischer. And Dan Osborne, things are looking up for him, but I really don't think he's going to be able to win here. I mean, it is Nebraska. It is an election year. If it was 2026, when there was no presidential election, I would genuinely say I think Dan Osborne would win here. However, I do think that Deb Fischer is narrowly going to pull out a victory, probably about 5%. I could very well see it being lean. I really conflicted. It's probably going to be about 5%. I am going to put it as likely just because it is an election year and she did win here by 19%. So I do think that Nebraska is very narrowly going to be likely. And yeah, that's my Nebraska opinion. And now that brings Republicans all the way up to 50 electoral votes. Not 50 electoral votes, 50 Senate seats to Democrats 46. Democrats need all 4 to tie, and then they need the presidency to break the tie. That is how easy it is for Republicans to win here in the Senate. The first one, which I think is the most easiest for Democrats, is Tammy Baldwin. My last prediction, I actually had Tammy Baldwin winning by a likely margin. This time, I think that she will win by a lean margin. I've narrowed it down a little bit. If we go to the Wisconsin polls, we can see that's Washington. If we go to the Wisconsin polls, we can see that things have narrowed up a lot recently. At one point, I mean, Tammy Baldwin's only up by 1.9%. Things gotten a lot closer. It is Tammy Baldwin versus what's his first name? Eric Hovde, that's what it is. So yeah, Tammy Baldwin versus Eric Hovde. Sorry if I'm butchering the last name Hovde, but yeah, we have Baldwin up by 2.3%. If we look at the recent elections, we can see Baldwin won here by 11%, similar to Bob Casey's number. So why do I think this will be a little bit different? Because for one, Baldwin won here by less, and I think this is she was in 2012. Was she in 2006? No, she wasn't. So she is one term after Bob Casey. I mean, Bob Casey has been around since 2006. Tammy Baldwin has been around since 2012. So Bob Casey is more of a senior Democratic senator. And Wisconsin in 2012, she only won here by 5.5%. I mean, and Bob Casey won here by 9.1%, and this was a presidential election year. Baldwin only won here by 5.5%, which is much closer. And if we go back to the presidential election in 2012, we can see that Obama only won here by 6.9%. Well, he did win here by 7%. And then in 2020, or 2016, even the next year, he won here by 0.76. And then in 2020, he only lost here by 0.63. So look at how much closer, look at how much further to the right Wisconsin shifted from 2012 to 2016. And there's really not, there's pretty good reason to believe that Tammy Baldwin's margin could also shift quite a bit to the right as well. And although Tammy Baldwin is certainly more popular than Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton in Wisconsin than they were, I do think that it will still shift to the right quite a bit, especially with polarization, especially because it's a presidential election year. There are a lot of factors going into Wisconsin, but I do think she is popular enough to win here in Wisconsin, probably about 3 to 4%. And then we have 3 states left. I believe that Michigan will also be a lean margin. In Michigan, we have Alyssa Slotkin, who will be running against Mike Rogers. If we look at these polls, we can see it's also pretty close. In Michigan, right now, Alyssa Slotkin is up by 4%, and it has been consistently very close. At one point, Slotkin only led here by 1.6% back in May, and since then it's moved a little bit further apart. However, it's gotten a little bit closer recently, and now it is Slotkin plus 4, so it's pretty close. In this election, Slotkin only up by 1 in this poll here, and we even saw a poll here that showed Mike Rogers up by 2%. So there are some polls that show Mike Rogers up. However, most agree that Alyssa Slotkin will probably win here by a pretty solid margin. If we look at Michigan, we can also see that Debbie Stabenow is retiring, and she was very popular in Michigan. She probably would have won here by a likely margin, especially because Michigan is more liberal than Wisconsin and Pennsylvania is. However, she is retiring. She endorsed Alyssa Slotkin for the Senate elections, which is why it'll be a little bit closer. I don't think Alyssa Slotkin is too strong of a Democratic candidate either, but Alyssa Slotkin is still probably going to win here by a pretty solid margin, probably about 2 to 3%. She can kind of ride off of Debbie Stabenow's popularity in Michigan, and although it won't be as wide as of a margin as Debbie Stabenow's was, it'll still probably be Slotkin plus 2 to 3%. And then in Texas, I have Ted Cruz winning here by a lean margin. I think probably about 4%, just under that 5% margin. Because if we look at previous elections, we can see that the last one Ted Cruz was in was against Beto O'Rourke, and Beto O'Rourke got actually a lot of popularity for this because He was challenging Ted Cruz and actually was very close. Although the polls showed Beto O'Rourke winning, and if we look at 2012, Ted Cruz won here by 16%. So this margin was shocking for Ted Cruz. Really, no one expected Beto O'Rourke to do this well in Texas, and while he didn't wind up winning it, he did come very, very close. He then wound up running in 2020 Democratic primary, and he lost that as well. And so, yeah, this one was very close. And Ted Cruz is definitely not a very popular candidate. He's not very popular even amongst Republicans, which is why this race will still be pretty close. It is Colin Allred running on the Democratic side, and while he's probably not as strong as Beto O'Rourke was, this race is definitely not getting as much attention as the 2018 race did. It is still going to be fairly close, probably Ted Cruz plus 4 or 5%. And that leaves us with our final state that also gives Republicans the majority, 51 to 48. Even if Democrats win Ohio, it would still be a Republican majority. So that brings us to our final state, the state of Ohio. This state is going to be very close. We have incumbent Senator Sherrod Brown for the Democratic Party, who has been pretty popular. If we look at 2018, he won here by 7%. In 2012, he won here by 6%. He won here by very similar margin in 2012 and 2018. Keep in mind, in 2018, this was after Donald Trump won by 8% in 2016. This was after that. This was not too long ago. This was just 6 years ago, and Sherrod Brown was still able to win here by 7%. However, this was not a presidential election year. This is 2 years after that, and 2 years before the 2020 presidential election. So, yeah, now we're in a presidential election where Donald Trump is probably going to win here by 7 or 8, 9% in Ohio. So can Sherrod Brown overcome that? That is the big question. This race is going to be extremely competitive. If you look at the polls, it is the most competitive race out of the Senate races according to the polls. He's up by 1.7%. Sherrod Brown is. It's very close to Sherrod Brown versus Bernie Moreno. There was a pretty close Republican primary here, and Bernie Moreno was probably the worst of the three candidates. He was probably the least electable. I think that if LaRose or Dolan won, they probably would have won the general election. However, Bernie Moreno wound up winning the Republican primary very narrowly, and it wound up leading to a much closer race than what a lot of people were anticipating. This race is going to be very, very close. In my last election, in my last prediction, I think I had Bernie Moreno winning by a tilt margin. Before that, I had Sherrod Brown winning. I mean, I've really flip-flopped on this one. This one's one I'm very, very close on. I really don't know who's going to win here. It's going to be very close. But right now, I do think that Sherrod Brown very narrowly wins here. It is going to be extremely close. I mean, I really don't see a way. Also, this is kind of to my point about Pennsylvania and Wisconsin being less close than what a lot of people are thinking. Why would Ohio be very close and Pennsylvania, Wisconsin are also very close? I mean, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, they are they're much further to the left than what Ohio is, so I really don't see a way for Ohio to be close and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania to be extremely close as well. Ohio, I mean, they're all popular senators, but yeah, that's kind of a side tangent. In Ohio, I do think Sherrod Brown wins here. I mean, he is a very popular senator. He's very popular among Ohioans. He won here by a very solid margin, by 7% in 2018, and in 2012, he won here by 6% as well. He is a very popular senator in Ohio, and Bernie Moreno is kind of a weak candidate, which is why I do think that Ohio is very, very narrowly going to go to Sherrod Brown. It is going to be very close. But that is my prediction. He's probably going to win here by 0.1 or 0.2. It is going to be a very close election. So if you did enjoy this video, please like and subscribe. The final map is 51 seats for Republicans and 49 for Democrats. If you did like the video, please like and subscribe. We're trying to get to 500 subscribers by election day. We're at 332 at the time of filming this. So yeah, we'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.